At MedStory, we take privacy seriously and follow all healthcare privacy laws. Some details may have changed to protect confidentiality. The views expressed are solely of the individual speaking and do not represent the views of their employer.
You hear people talk about yoga and how it helps them, and everyone thinks like, oh, it's just like this like woo-woo thing that people feel like makes them feel better. But yoga has enough scientific evidence to be in national guidelines for multiple conditions, including back pain, cancer, migraine, and eating disorders.
From MedStory Studios, this is the MedStory Podcast, where we share the stories of the greatest minds in science and medicine. I'm Spencer Locke, and on today's show, how Dr. Jonathan Rosenthal used neuroscience and yoga to challenge the way we think about our medical system, build a global conference, and change the way doctors think about healing. In the early 2000s, in a hot yoga studio in New York City, Jonathan Rosenthal is just 15 years old. He's a runner, but he sprained his ankle, and a friend tells him, try yoga.
I went to this class, and not only was it all middle-aged women, but it was hot yoga, so they were all in bathing suits. And I was like, I don't fit in here at all. Like, what am I doing here? And at the end, I was like, that was actually really fun. Like, I enjoyed that. So I went back and I ended up becoming friends with all these people my mom's age.
That unlikely moment, a teenager in a hot yoga class, would spark a lifelong journey that would collide with his other passion of neuroscience. Because Jonathan wasn't just any teenager. He would go on to become a neurologist in New York City, a researcher for Memorial Sloan Kettering, and the founder of the Neuroscience and Yoga Conference, a global event that now reaches 10,000 people a year. And yet, what makes Jonathan's story extraordinary isn't just what he's achieved, it's the paradox. A doctor trained in the most rigorous science who found his voice in a practice that's often dismissed as unscientific. This is his story. What is one surprising truth about yoga that most people completely overlook?
I think the biggest one that I think no one realizes is that it's in medical guidelines. So, you hear people talk about yoga and how it helps them, and everyone thinks like, oh, it's just like this like woo-woo thing that people feel like makes them feel better. But yoga is it has enough scientific evidence to be in national guidelines for multiple conditions, including back pain, cancer, migraine, and eating disorders. And there's another one that I can't remember right now, but there's an exponentially accumulating amount of evidence on yoga. And I think that, to me, is one of the most surprising things.
Now, my understanding, and I was one of those people that was like, yoga is amazing. I understand the value of it, but my thought was it was mostly based off of Eastern philosophy, where the research was mostly anecdotal. So you're telling me that there's more actual qualitative research on this kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I don't know the number of randomized controlled trials off the top of my head. There's 9,000 studies published on yoga if you search PubMed. Many of them are pretty low quality, but there's a growing number of large randomized controlled trials and meta-analyses on yoga, specifically in areas like the ones I just mentioned, like back pain, migraine. And this is like a huge area. Like, I think the next area that yoga is going to get into the guidelines for is in mental health and stress regulation. And so, yeah, there's huge studies.
So if there is that extensive of medical literature that says, yes, this is effective for all these conditions, why has it not been implemented into the mainstream healthcare system?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So to some extent, it really has. And I think we don't necessarily see it. But like, for example, if you go to Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City, which is where I did my fellowship, they have a full yoga program available for free to every cancer patient because it's in the guidelines. There are multiple researchers, MSK, doing research, and they actually look at it specifically for neuropathy, so helping with chemotherapy-induced polyneuropathy. And so it's like, it is built into certain health systems, but it's not built into the insurance system. So insurance currently does not pay for yoga. People who do get insurance to pay for yoga actually usually bill it as physical therapy. And so usually they have a physical therapy background or occupational therapy background, and then they're using yoga techniques, but using the billing codes from their primary training. So like a yoga teacher would not be able to bill insurance. And so that I think is the main reason is because of the money. Like, so if there's money at an institution for yoga to be offered, then it is offered like at MSK. And the way they do it at MSK is there was a private donor. And so they fund this huge research program with that.
So what really started your interest in this to be like, okay, I'm going to do training in yoga, but then I'm actually going to start looking into the science of it?
It was completely accidental. I was a yoga student myself. I found yoga when I was a teenager. I got really lucky. I don't know what drew me to yoga exactly. I read a book in 9th grade that our teacher made us read called Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. And it's like a fiction about someone on an enlightenment and self-realization journey. And I read it and I thought, that was really cool. Like, I want to learn more about this. Wikipedia rabbit holed my way to learning about yoga. I wanted to find a yoga teacher. And I thought, there has to be someone who's going to teach about this kind of way of thinking and way of living. But my impression of yoga from just seeing or like representations of yoga in the media was that it was all middle-aged women. And so I'm like, what am I as a 15, 16-year-old boy going to be doing in a yoga class? Like it's going to be super weird. But actually, I hurt my ankle running and I went, one of my friends was like, try yoga instead since you can't run right now. And I went to this class and not only was it all middle-aged women, but it was hot yoga. So they were all in bathing suits. And I was like, I don't fit in here at all. Like, what am I doing here? And I did the class, I didn't leave or anything. And at the end, I was like, that was actually really fun. Like, I enjoyed that. So I went back and I ended up becoming friends with all these people my mom's age and just slowly found my way to my current teacher, Sri Dharma Mitra in New York City, and see yoga as like a huge part of my life. So I had that experience and at the same time was pursuing a career in neuroscience and then medicine. And I was like, wow, I could not feel like I'm more of a pariah in both worlds for liking the other, like in the medicine world, I was like, yoga feels like hippy dippy woo woo stuff. And in the yoga world, they're like, oh, I don't trust a doctor. And so I kind of was, I don't know, a little bit identity crisis about it. And then I ended up just looking up scientific papers about yoga. And at that time it was, 2013, and there were already thousands, So I was like, okay, there's way more to yoga than the medicine world realizes. And also like these will accept medicine so much more if they see the science. So I just started hosting events about the published research on yoga.
That's so cool. And we're going to go into the evolution of those events. But when you started to look into the research, was there any research that you found that kind of surprised even you, where you're like, whoa, this is the real deal?
There's many increasing numbers of imaging studies being done on yoga, and not just structural studies, which are interesting in and of themselves, but also functional studies. And then I think the one that really blew me away when I was in college was this magnetic resonance spectroscopy study where they were measuring GABA concentrations in the thalamus before and after yoga. For anyone who is trying to remember what the heck GABA does, it's the main inhibitory neuron in the brain. It's 10% of neurons, and it's the same receptor that alcohol acts on. So sometimes people think of it as a relaxing kind of neurotransmitter, but it's really also just critical for contrast sensitivity, resolution of neural systems, their ability to detect changes. So yeah, I saw this paper that a yoga intervention dramatically increases GABA in the thalamus. And I was like, oh, that is incredible to have that level of evidence. So yeah, that one was the early one that blew me away. And ever since then, I think a good imaging study is still really appealing, but now I really love the ones that just have brilliant designs where you're comparing yoga to something really important. And then you're also so I'll tell you my favorite one recently. So it's called the randomized controlled preference trial. And it was older people who had anxiety, and they randomized them to either be able to choose yoga or cognitive behavioral therapy. So they were presented both as options and chose whichever appealed to them, or they were just forced to do. didn't matter what they liked. And if you ask anyone, they would say, my hypothesis is that if you do the one that you like, you're going to do better. And that's not what they found. So not only was CBT and yoga similarly effective, CBT was better for sleep, but that was the only thing it was better for. It was the same whether you were forced to do it or whether you chose to do it. So it didn't matter if you didn't like yoga to start with, which I think is like a huge, brilliant takeaway. Like all the people who are like, no, yoga's not for me. Like actually, if you try it, it'll probably have the exact same benefits as it does for the people who like it.
That is so cool. So you start to see this research, you start to become a believer yourself, and then you start to host these events. Did people show up for them, or were they like, no, I'm not interested in this?
So the first events were local in New York City, and I advertised them by putting them in local newspapers. And it was like, I don't know, 2014, 2015, 2016. And we would get like 100 people who would show up. And it was amazing. It was like super cool. It was all kinds of people all over the place. I would ask researchers from New York, like the New York area, to present at the event. And then there would be a yoga class as well. And we would do experiments before and after so that people could like see the effects on themselves. And yeah, those were really, really fun events. And then over time, the way it evolved was 2020, when COVID happened, it was actually like the week that the event was supposed to be. I forget the exact dates, but it was like if New York shut down on March 16th, it was like the event was supposed to be March 18th. So the event was canceled and I trying to figure out what to do about it. And, people always tell you like, turn every bad thing into an opportunity or something. And I was like, all right, how do I do that here? And so I was thinking like, oh, the researchers that, from the papers I read, they live all over the world and like everyone's online right now. Like it would be really cool to have researchers from all over the world present. So I invited some of my favorite researchers from all over the world. It way more said yes than I was anticipating. And so it ended up becoming a conference because it was like with so many people presenting. And yeah, that's how the Neuroscience and Yoga Conference started. And now the Neuroscience and Yoga Conference reaches about 10,000 people a year. And it's a combination of an in-person event and then also an encore, which is like on-demand recordings available.
Wow. You've really built this up. And this has been over what, a decade?
Yeah, this is the 11th year.
That's incredible. And so when you were building this out, I'm guessing you were kind of just figuring it out as you went, right? You're figuring out, how do I actually host something of this magnitude? Were you just as simple as let's put it on Zoom, or how did you build it?
So the first year I actually bought like a course about how to host an online event. Cause yeah, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And of course I could, Zoom was easy. Zoom was the easy part, but in terms of like setting up a system so that everyone knew where to go and when and how to make the user interface friendly and a website and all of that stuff. So the way I set it up was really simple. So there was a free pass, paid pass that allowed people to come to like extra events. And then also a pass that had like continuing education credit and recordings and all that stuff. And use WordPress. I've become like a little bit of a WordPress aficionado. I really like WordPress. And so I built out a website and I set up like, a learning management system, built out the cart software. I bought cart software, but like built out what the carts look like. Yeah, the first year was very simple in terms of software. Like those were the only, and an email, like an autoresponder that was able to tag people appropriately and then send them emails based on what paths they had and, give them the right links at the right time. So kind of really simple the first year. Ever since then, it's gotten really complicated. I've learned that a lot of my audience is not comfortable with technology. So I have to make it as simple as possible. And so I've bought a lot more software since then. It's to the point where people don't even really have to log in on my website anymore. The website just knows who they are and it can show them the right content based on who they are. It uses a mixture of like cookies and IP address to do that. And then, it can like, if they're on the wrong page, it can like recognize that and tell them like, hey, I think you mean to be on this page. Like it just like catches every time I get a support request, I like build something to make sure that doesn't happen. So it's become like a really big software thing.
I love to hear how it's been like an iterative process because you built out the foundation, you built out your MVP, your minimum viable product, being like, what is the minimum that I need to get this thing launched? And then from there, how do I incrementally get it better based on the questions that I'm getting and the feedback?
Exactly.
And, it's a beautiful feedback loop, and that's how science works, and that's how business should work as well, right?
Yeah,
So
100%.
what's the vision with this? Like, what do you want it to become?
Great question. So I have thought about this a lot, and I'm trying, in a way, replicate the mission of medicine, but through this specific lens. And so right now it's really focused on education. The conference is an educational event. It is for yoga students and teachers and clinicians who want to learn published research in yoga. And it comes with, continuing education credits and not only the theory, but also like practical applications and also advocacy applications. Like how do you take this knowledge and bring it to a school, a hospital, prison, and get yoga there? So that's like the education mission right now. And then the second mission of it that I've been working on is a research mission. So I really think that yoga research is ready for some revolution. I don't know what the right word is. I'm being dramatic. But the current state of it is it's built on kind of the pharmaceutical model of research. So, extremely expensive trials, like people being paid to participate in the study, all that kind of stuff. But the way I see it is people are already spending globally like $100 billion. And in the US, I think it's like $10 billion on yoga. So like, what if we just put the experiments before and after the yoga classes that people are already taking? So I am trying to build out a research program that is able to do this. I've done 2 pilots of it. The second pilot was a randomized controlled crossover trial that was all automated. So it was incredibly affordable to run. It used the exact same technology as the conference with people signing up and then the email server being able to like randomize them to which condition they were in. And then they got emails every day automated with instructions of what to do. And yeah, they completed classes like breathing exercise classes, or they were in a control group where they did sleep hygiene education. And then they had measurements on sleep quality and anxiety. So that I think is really cool and exciting. I want to do more of that. And so I'm trying to, build out a whole research program.
This is so cool. So do you think, are these people that you've only seen online, or are you actually putting like Pat in a yoga studio where they can fill out the information and then start collecting that kind of data?
So the second one has not happened yet, but I definitely have thought a lot about that. And because the conference has so many yoga teachers in it who are interested in research, I think it's an incredible opportunity to partner with them. However, I think that would get really messy. Like I think there needs to be a way to make that a bit more controlled. I have built a just qualitative yoga survey that asks people like, why do you practice yoga? What do you actually do when you practice yoga? What benefits do you think you get? And have you had any adverse effects? And I share that very widely. I ask people to share that with their community as well. And we have like 500 people who have answered that, but I want to get it like much more. I want to get like a really good sample on that. And I think it'll be interesting to see the results. But that's like the only kind of study that I think would work well on an iPad. I think if we were trying to do these like randomized control trials, testing a very specific hypothesis, I think it would be a mess. Because different people come to the classes each week. I think for those, we really need to control what they see and give them the videos. Yeah.
That makes sense. So as you build out your own research and as we look at the stuff that's already out there, if a healthcare provider is treating a patient and they say, okay, wow, Jonathan says that it works for migraines. Maybe I should recommend that they try yoga. But yoga in general, it's fairly broad, no? And so do they just say, just go to your local yoga instructor? Or do we need further guidance on that to come up with some guidelines so that they can make better recommendations of where to go based on their condition?
Yeah, this is a really important question. The answer right now is they should seek a yoga therapist, which is kind of a burgeoning profession. So a yoga teacher teaches yoga to everyone. But a yoga therapist teaches more to individuals or small groups with particular diseases and has expertise in customizing it for those diseases. Now, the vast majority of diseases probably don't need that much customization. But if you're dealing with someone with advanced cancer who's on multiple chemotherapies and has osteopenia from those chemotherapies, you probably want a yoga therapist who's going to be able to teach them yoga safely. And so, yeah, there's actually someone I know, his name is Jake Panasevich. He's a health journalist and also a yoga teacher. And he's actually doing his first research project right now after attending the Neuroscience and Yoga Conference, where he's trying to basically build a flowchart that patients can bring to their physicians and be like, what am I allowed to do in yoga versus what am I not allowed to do? Because it's exactly like you said, like right now, let's say a clinician wants to refer a patient to yoga. All they know how to say is, you should try yoga, which isn't necessarily very helpful. And so this flowchart would help them make recommendations, even without them knowing much about yoga. They would just be able to like answer some questions about what they think is best for the patient, and that would guide the patient towards what yoga is best. And I think that's a brilliant idea. And otherwise, I think, there are, I don't know how many, but let's say thousands of types of yoga, right? And there's more popping up all the time. But really, like the core components of yoga that are studied in these research studies are postures, breathing, meditation, relaxation, and to a certain extent, also like philosophy, like ethical rules, personal behavior observances. That's really what the practice is, like, doesn't matter if you do a triangle pose or if you do a mountain pose, like, do you have to do this specific sequence? Like, that stuff doesn't seem to matter. It's like, it's just, you do those 6 things with a mindful awareness, and that's really the practice that has benefits. And, let's say someone is like super inflexible and is like, no, I can't do all that. It's like, it actually probably doesn't matter at all how far you extend posture. Like it's the attitude you have while you're doing it, and that you're actually making effort and breathing as you do it and relaxing and changing your mindset on things. Yeah.
I can so relate to that, right? As a physical therapist, I'm trained as a physical therapist. And one thing that the profession has moved from was being like, here are specific exercise protocols based off your condition, compared to, let's keep it more general and focus on just like progressive exercise and progressive movement, keeping their buy-in and keeping them actually consistent, and just allow time and energy to do its thing.
Yeah.
Right. And that's very much related to the philosophy that you're sharing right there. I love hearing you talk about this, and like, I'm just brainstorming already, because thinking about the yoga therapist, are there programs out there where a physical therapist or an occupational therapist who already has this sort of background can take this? And if not, we should probably build one.
There definitely are. There's a good number of yoga therapy schools, and, I haven't attended one myself, so I don't know what makes a good one.
Right.
But I do know many people who run yoga therapy schools, and as people, I think they're incredible people. So I imagine their school is very good. So yeah, the other thing to know about it is there's actually a body. So there's the International Association of Yoga Therapy, IAYT, and they accredit all of the yoga therapy schools. And it's different than the Yoga Teacher Accreditation Society, the Yoga Alliance. It's just a bit more like stringent, and the requirements for completing the like certificate are much more. So yeah, yoga therapy is a up-and-coming thing, I think. It just is going to depend on like whether things get paid for.
Right. Yeah. And we don't have to get into this right now, but knowing of how the insurance model currently works, how they make money, it doesn't really make sense for them to cover this kind of service, even though it would lead to better outcomes and probably mean that they need less medical care. But they struggle. They're really struggling to adopt this kind of mindset.
But I will say, like, the veterans health system, the VA system, is, as part of their whole person health program. I'm forgetting if that's what it's called right now. I don't know why I'm blanking on that. I think it's called whole person health or something like that. They are including yoga. It's offered at many of the VAs for free for veterans. They usually choose teachers who are veterans themselves so that the veterans can really relate to them. Yeah, it's like an incredibly successful program. So
cool.
in certain models, it really is taking off and working.
For sure. I could see it totally working in that kind of model. The private insurance model, who knows, but we'll see. I'm totally down to get behind that fight to try to bring it out there and make it more mainstream.
Yeah.
So if a healthcare provider is either considering doing yoga themselves or starting to recommend, or even thinking about starting to recommend it to their patients, what do you want to say to them?
Yeah, great question. So I think first is knowing like major indications for yoga and like things of yoga. So yoga really helps across the board for everyone with things like stress, mood, sleep, quality of life, and coping. And so for so many diseases, it's going to make people feel better. Like they're just going to be like, oh, I like my life better. But it's not going to like reverse cancer. Like it's not going to like, I don't know. Here's the thing. I'm thinking of things and I'm like, actually, it might do that. Like, it actually probably could really help with diabetes. Like there's a few major studies on yoga and diabetes. It's not in guidelines yet, but it's a thing. Like there's a few studies on yoga and fertility, and it actually like improves fertility. I'm pretty sure yoga is like making its way into pregnancy guidelines, prenatal yoga, to really help reduce like emergency C-sections and complications during delivery, based on some of the research that's been published. So yeah, I'm trying to think of a thing that it's like, no, it's not going to help with that, but actually there's things it's probably going to help with. And so, yeah, I think the main limitations to keep in mind is it's not like a cure or a panacea. Many patients will start to think of it that way. And I think just like counseling people that this is like good. You know how sometimes people make the analogy like flossing your teeth? Like you like take care of something regularly. Like doing yoga is like flossing your mind and your mindset a bit. Like it's really good for keeping your outlook and your perspective and your self-regulation in a good place. Yeah.
I love it. I love it so much. I can see this is where the yoga industry as a whole has, even though there's a building body of evidence, there's still that public belief of the woo-woo-ness from some people. And I think there are certain voices out there that say, oh, there's this research article where it could help with pregnancy or fertility. Oh, you should only do yoga and don't go see your OBGYN, and these extreme claims, which is very unfortunate and looks bad for the whole field.
Correct. Yeah. And I think yoga has a credibility problem too. Like, despite all of the evidence that has been published, there's a credibility problem because the way people talk about it is like exaggerated and blown out of proportion and even a bit like cult-like sometimes. And, there's a whole parallel way of thinking about yoga, which is from the more like Ayurvedic or even like very spiritual mindsets that some people use to understand yoga. And so people, like a lot of people from the yoga world will come to a scientific medical setting and say things like, this will align your chakras. And it's like, that doesn't make sense to a hospital to convince them to teach yoga. So yeah, I think what it really comes down to is science is the language of modern society. I think as yoga learns to adopt that language, it will be more accepted. Sometimes people get really upset by this, especially people who come from kind of South Asian backgrounds where yoga is like a very important traditional thing for them. They see it as cultural appropriation. And I totally get that. My perspective on this is yoga is for everyone, and yoga has always been evolving. If studying yoga and talking about it scientifically helps more people practice and experience the benefits of yoga and move, I think still it is moving people on this journey of self-realization. That is still within the goals of yoga. The big thing right now is people are upset when people use yoga practices, but call them something other than yoga. And I get it, but I'm going to be honest. If you put a flyer up and say yoga class versus put another flyer up and say fun, mindful movement, people are going to sign up for fun, mindful movement. They're scared of yoga, and it could be the exact same class. And so I think what it is like, in order to be respectful, we do need to talk about yoga and the tradition. But maybe when we're like talking to people about it the first time, we speak their language.
It's really brilliant because if you really want to spread the power of what this can offer, you need to be able to speak what the people that make the decisions speak. And fixing that credibility problem is literally teaching our yoga leaders how to speak in science. And that is literally what you're doing. So it's so cool. I can so get behind your mission. It really is incredible. So if someone is listening to this and they say, you know what, I want to go and learn more about it. I would love to learn about the neuroscience behind yoga. Where can they learn more about you or maybe even the conference?
So the conference is available year round, and the base pass is always free. So people can just check it out. And so you could even just Google Neuroscience and Yoga Conference, and it should be the first result. And then you click in and you can read about what's offered. Every year has different topics. So we've done things like yoga and cognition, yoga and brain aging, yoga and child development, yoga and mental health, yoga and pain, yoga and empathy, yoga and I can't even remember all of them, yoga and eating disorders, yoga and cancer. This year, the topics were yoga and endocrine health, looking at things like thyroid function, metabolism, stress physiology, and osteoporosis. And then yoga and reproductive health, which looked at fertility, pregnancy, and the fertility was in both men and women. Actually, it was much more in men, which was super interesting. Yeah, there's a researcher in India who for the past 20 years has been studying sperm function before and after yoga interventions. It's like, you would never think that research exists, but it does. So so fertility, pregnancy, menopause, PCOS. The last one was yoga and I'm forgetting. Damn.
Well, if they want to learn, they just have to go to the conference.
Yeah,
what is
just
it?
Go to the website. Concussion and brain injury.
Okay.
So that's another really good one. So those 3 topics were the ones this year. And so if you go on the website, you can read about like who the speakers are, what the presentations were, if it's interesting to you. And then all you have to do is put your email in and you get an email every day with like what you should do to learn.
This is amazing. I can't tell you how valuable it is, the work that you're doing and your willingness to share it here. I know that anyone listening to this is going to be like, heck yeah, like it sparked my interest. Like I'm going to go check it out now too. Hopefully we can continue this wave and get more people behind it. Because if we're getting people focusing on mindfulness and movement, if we're going to have a happier and healthier population. And that's what it's all about.
100%. And I think, if you look at so many different traditions or cultures, they have something similar to yoga. Like Tai Chi is really Chinese yoga. And so it's like something that we've lost over time. And it's really great to include something like yoga in your life. So yeah.
I totally agree. Awesome. Dr. Rosenthal, I so appreciate you coming on, man. Like, this is great. And I have a feeling we're going to continue this conversation. I would love to do a roundtable where we bring on like some psychiatrists that I've talked to, even some OBGYNs. I think it would be great to pick each other's minds. And I think we'd have fun with that. But thanks again, man. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you so much. I'm really glad you're doing this project because it's so cool to learn from other people in the healthcare world.
Thanks for listening to the MedStory Podcast, where we share the stories of the greatest minds in science and medicine. I'm your host, Spencer Locke, with a special thanks to our executive producer, Shina May. Our music comes from Blue Dot Sessions and the Descript Audio Library. The MedStory Podcast is made possible by MedStory Studios and listeners like you. So if you'd like to support us, please leave a review. It means more than you know. And if you have a story to share or want to produce a podcast of your own, reach out to us at info@medstorymedia.com. We'll see you in the next episode.